the general question here is, like, how do you deal with group discussions that turn into what it starts off as a friendly joking, but then people end up insulting each other in some way or saying something that one person perceives as inappropriate and they feel offended or upset. And this is obviously this can create some serious problems on a team, right? Where people aren't communicating because they're afraid to. They're afraid that they're going to be attacked or embarrassed in some way in front of a group. And you definitely don't want that in a team dynamic. You want everyone to feel comfortable to be able to communicate. And it's kind of the general term that's used now is emotional safety, right? We want people to feel not only physically safe in the workplace, but emotionally safe in the workplace. So as a general rule in group discussions, I think, and I'm guilty of this oftentimes myself. I think what we tend to do is we tend to not be intentional enough about group discussions. And what I mean by that is even as simple as many people come to a meeting without an agenda. And just as an aside, maybe, I think that's a poor practice. I think if we're going to take the time to have a meeting of some type, there should be some type of agenda, and people should know that agenda ahead of time, so that it helps them plan for like what they might contribute or what things they might need to research ahead of time. Even if it's a small meeting, just taking a minute or two to think through what do you want to accomplish and what is the agenda is a very helpful practice. So along that same line, some people, again, and I've failed to create agendas several times. I'm just trying to create a meeting very quickly. But beyond that's kind of the bare minimum, right? Of having some structure to how we want a meeting of people to proceed. But I think a little bit more advanced level there is creating some type of shared rules for what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And I think what tends to be most effective when doing that is to not have it be dictated by the most senior person in the room. I think it's good to get group involvement, to say, like, hey, what do we want to have as rules and guidelines to make our meetings so that they're efficient, we're not wasting time, so that maybe that they're fun, that they're not boring. So that could include the friendly banter, but then also so that everyone feels emotionally safe. What are some rules that we could think of? And it might be worth your time or any manager's time to take a full meeting just to create those ground rules. Maybe as a different example, in the education world, there's a style of teaching called responsive classroom that is very, very effective. And it's amazing to watch how they do it, where like in a lot of classrooms, you'll talk about rules here and there, and it usually comes from the teacher, right? They're saying these are the rules of the classroom. And then they just get right into learning, on the first or second day. And invariably what happens is there's a lot of time lost dealing with discipline issues because there wasn't enough time up front creating the groundwork for what's an emotionally safe place to learn. And so what Responsive Classroom does is they spend sometimes many as 2 weeks of a school year, the first 2 weeks, learning nothing other than creating the kids create the rules. So it's like, hey, what do we think we should do in this situation? What do we think we should do in this situation? What should the consequences be if somebody fails to abide by the rules that you think we should follow? So the kids create the rules, the kids create the consequences. And as you would guess, what happens is the buy-in is tremendous because the kids created the rules, the kids created the consequences, sometimes with some guidance from the teacher. But they basically created a safe place for themselves. And so there's tremendous buy-in. Everyone has agreed to these things. So it makes it very, very safe. And then from then on, you don't have to ever worry about it again. I mean, obviously, there's still people fail to follow the rules sometimes, but they abide by the consequences because they help create them. So you end up with a net more learning time because of taking that time up front to create the groundwork. So that would be what I would suggest. You know, if this is, it might be a good idea, even if you have a team that's functioning really well, to just ask questions like maybe ask the team like, what can we do to make the meetings both productive and fun and safe? Those are probably the three things that you want to have in an effective meeting. Get ideas from the team and ask the team like what should be consequences if one of these things is not happening, and let them decide. And then of course, at first it might need a little bit of guidance from you or from somebody else who's kind of a de facto leader, whether they have a title or not. When you see an instance of somebody crossing the line from friendly banter to a joke that's insulting or making somebody feel not safe, that needs to be addressed immediately. Um, and and it can just be a simple question like, hey, let's pause for a moment. I just witnessed this happen. Person A said this to person B. From my perspective, it looked like person B did not appreciate that. Um, what is your perception here? Like, what did you think that comment was appropriate? Do you think it might have caused some type of emotional upset for this person or make them feel not safe? And so right there can be, a coaching moment, because sometimes, I mean, everyone has like a different sense of humor. I know people that are very good friends that love each other tremendously, and their mode of fun is just to insult each other incessantly. You might know people like that. Even some married couples do that to each other. And it's just they don't mean anything by it, but they know each other so well, and it's okay. So some people, that might just be their mode of like how they really show that they really like somebody, is to feel like, hey, I feel safe enough with you that we can trade insults, you know? But if they do that with somebody who's not close enough to them or doesn't operate in that way, that can be very offensive. So, I think right there, it could, anytime it happens, especially if you've taken the time to set up these ground rules, um, whenever it happens, to just immediately pause and in a skillful way, just say, "Hey, what? I just noticed something happen. Um, what do you think? How do you think your comment affected this person?" And see what they say. And if the answer is, "Well, I'm not sure. I was just being funny," and you look at them, and the person's miserable, and they might say, "Oh, did I did that comment, hurt your feelings, or do you feel offended or whatever?" And the person says, "Yeah, I didn't appreciate that." Right there, they might just say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that." And then they're starting to learn, like, okay, um, this is where the line is with that particular person or with somebody else. I think that might be a great way to keep the friendly banter going, but without having people feel like a line's being crossed where they're not safe.